Hi, this is János, this is Real World Audio, and today let's talk about measurements again. So basically, measurements, in my opinion, and in the opinion of most of you, or many of you, or some of you, regarding who is watching the video, they are about establishing whether your unit that you are looking at functions correctly or not. And if you want to do assumptions based on the sound quality, like a correlation between measurement and sound quality, that's something of a much harder issue, and so far was not tackled successfully. And I am a research scientist, and I have been always interested in measurements and how they affect what we hear. And back in my early days of audio, I really spent quite a bit of time looking at this subject and seeking out what the most experienced people who are most experienced in measuring say about the measurements. And what I have found is that even them, after 20, 30, 40 years of hardcore research, that kind of research being their life's work, their paying profession, they still were not able to find a comfortable correlation between measurement and sound quality. There are sometimes you can find a certain niche where in looking at a specific application of a specific part, we can draw some correlations on sound quality and the measurements, but the problem is that the parameters that we are measuring are not necessarily those parameters that contribute to the perceived sound quality that we hear. I think one of the best examples for that was my friend Taltos, who's an astrophysicist, and he has an extremely solid basis in engineering, in the workings of amplifiers, amplifier design, solid state technology, not just amplifiers but satellites and things like that. And he used his considerable knowledge to put himself together a system, an audio system that measured the best. So this was 20 years ago, so he got a Sony amplifier which measured extremely good, one of the best at the time when he made the purchase. He got PSB loudspeakers, bookshelf speakers, which measured the very best at that time, and he accounted to me his experience. So he went to audition those PSB speakers in Toronto, Canada, and at the audio dealer, because even though he knew that they measure excellent, but he still didn't want to buy them without listening. So he's not that idealist. Despite his considerable knowledge, he's still practical because he's also a musician. So he knows that numbers don't mean anything unless it translates to actual experience. So he went to listen to those PSB speakers at a dealer. And he listened to them, and he was completely floored. He listened to 10 other models as well, and by far his most preferred one was the PSB speakers, and that confirmed his hypothesis that the better it measures, the better it sounds. However, here comes the twist. In the showroom, the salesman demoed all the speakers to him with a tube amplifier that had a measly 20 watt per channel output and very bad distortion figures. So, and it was a tube amplifier, and my friend, he was thinking, okay, if it sounds this good with an outdated tube amplifier, that measures piss poor compared to his excellently measuring Sony solid-state amplifier. When he takes them home, it will sound so much better. And he took them home, and he plugged them in, and in comparison to what he heard at the dealership, it sounded so bad that his first idea was to take back the speakers. But in his mind, he just could not put it together. How come that you know, on the speaker side, his assumption that the better it measures, it better it sounds, it worked, but with the amplifier, it just misfired 100% most completely. And he just said that probably it's just the major difference between technologies, and he does not have a mathematical or physics explanation for what he experienced. But it was very clear to him with a musician who had his musical education at the Peabody Conservatory, and he's an extremely talented musician. So we can really, I really certainly put a lot of credit to his words when he says something about the sound quality of something, because he knows how instruments sound, because he plays about 20 different instruments at a masterful level. So he's an incredible prodigy. And then I asked him that, do you recall what amplifier that was, the tube amp that you heard? And he says, yeah, it was some Japanese name. It was called the Ongaku. I think now this is when you guys start rolling with laughter. It was the Audio Note Ongaku, which is probably, as many of you know, one of the most famous or infamous amplifiers ever built. But for certain, it is an amp that sounds very natural, very musical. Compared to a solid-state amp, it has very rubbish parameters because it's a zero feedback single-ended triode amplifier. And when you have different topologies, these numbers, the distortion numbers that have a validity within the solid-state domain, if you want to transplant those numbers to single-ended tube amplifiers, they lose their meaning. They just don't connect together. So that's why I think the field of measurement and correlating how is the sound we are getting is not gelling together. And by any means, I think it's a very, very noble pursuit to dive deep into measurements and how you can apply to audio. I think for certain, if you use it for troubleshooting and finding what problems a certain equipment has, how to improve its sound, it is an incredibly powerful tool. And if there are channels that talk about it, by all means, watch them and learn from them. This is really valuable. On the other hand, if you want to use these measurements as a validation for sound quality you are hearing, I think they do not have a relationship between themselves. So you can, if within certain range of applicability, it will point you towards the right direction. But if you want to generalize using measurements to the audio as a whole for all kinds of components, it will really, I think, take you into dead ends and just prolong your audio journey. And why I am constantly repeating this, because I've seen so many of my friends, and when they just went hardcore measurements and got lost in them, they wasted their time from their audio quest. It was not an intellectual waste, because they were very, very rewarded intellectually by finding out lots of things, sometimes things that are not even published, and that by itself can be something that's truly rewarding for you. And however, what they lost, where they lost out, was their search for the experience, the sound quality they are getting from their systems. And those friends of theirs that put their time into actual listening to the component instead of going for the measurements, they exponentially increased the quality they are getting from their systems. And those who went into measurements hardcore stayed at the exact same level when they started their measurements. And I'm saying this because I have seen tears in the eyes of some of my friends who went to that path and then realized that 10 years went by and they could not make, maybe they took a single step, and others at that same time they jumped to the moon. So I want to just make it clear for you that what is your quest, what is it that you are looking for. If you are looking for an intellectual pursuit, then looking very hardcore into measurements correlated to sound quality, then that will be something very fascinating, but it will not get you any closer to a jump in your experience level with your audio system. You can take like tiny leaps, you will be very happy with it, but when you are confronted with what your buddies are doing who are 100% or 90% focus on their auditory skills, you will be very sad. So this is just a little advice. You can take it or leave it. It's really up to you what you want. Just this has been my experience that I've gathered from the experience of basically dozens and dozens of audio buddies around the world. There was something else I wanted to say, but right now I just can't recall what it was. And anyway, I think this is a nice and round story. And also, if measurements are a part of your work, then that's really fantastic. And I'm saying that because Hugo was commenting on this, and he was saying that he works in the semiconductor industry, and Hugo, I'm just so totally jealous, because when I was at the end of high school, I had two professions I had my mind set on, which I want to pursue in my life. One was semiconductor industry and the other was microbiology, and this was in Hungary, and of course Hungary is not famous for its Silicon Valley. There's no Silicon Valley in Hungary, so my only option was microbiology. But for microbiology, Hungary had extremely strong schools, so that's it. But it's really fascinating, and I'm always fascinated about learning about semiconductor industry and the developments there, and measurements, how we can do better measurements, and what else we can get out of them. And also, as from my perspective, what I'm looking at, what really intrigues me is how can we correlate or develop new set of measurements that measure the perception of the human brain. I think that is a field that's in its absolute infancy. It's basically neurophysiology or neurophysics, and it's in its really just the field is just now trying to learn how to walk on 2 feet, how to stand up, because we are just walking around in the cribs in that field. But when that gets out of that infancy phase, then that's when we will be able to develop a set of measurements to measure how we actually hear. And I think that will radically transform the field of how we correlate the measurements of audio gear to sound quality, because we are measuring the wrong parameters. We are measuring those parameters that tell whether it's working properly or not. but that's not what we need to establish for how we perceive sound quality. For that, what we need to know is how the brain translates it, and when we have like a better translation of the signal, that indicates a better component, and that's what we need to see. And for now we are not seeing it, but I think within 30-40 years we will have quite a comprehensive set of measurements for there. So my advice for all of you who are really trying to find out what a part makes in correlation to the perception of sound, my advice for you, and if you want to look at it professionally, is do double degrees, go for physics to understand the electronics gear, and also go for neuroscience so that you can understand how the brain translates it, and you put the two fields together, and that's where the breakthrough will come. And until then, if you are just using our scopes at home, that kind of thing, that's not enough by a long shot to make any useful correlations on the sound quality. So thank you, Hugo, for prompting this video. Thank you guys, have a wonderful day. And now I'm trying to stop my recording, which is happening through the computer. I have to use to this high-tech thing. I have to push the button over there.